Deficits, defaults, demonstrations. We've grown used to bad economic news from Europe. Today, the gloom of austerity lifted just a little, with figures showing a surprising rebound. Leading the Eurozone's positive showing is the powerhouse of Germany, which grew by 1.5%. Perhaps not surprising that. But even Greece, which has led this financial crisis, saw GDP grow by 0.8%. As the BBC's chief economics correspondent Hugh Pym reports, it's as much cause for celebration as the weekend's Eurovision Song Contest.
The Eurovision Song Contest tomorrow won't be featuring this entry. The Portuguese group, with a song celebrating the fight against austerity, failed to make the final. And figures today showed Portugal sliding down the table in Europe's growth contest. With output falling by 0.7% in the first quarter of the year, Portugal is back in recession. Germany, in contrast, powered ahead on the economic stage with 1.5% growth. France produced a strong 1% figure. That compares with the UK's 0.5%, and remember that only clawed back ground lost in the previous 3 months. So why is it that here in the UK there's been a flat growth performance compared to the brighter note being struck by our major European competitors? Well, one of the answers lies in the mounting pressure facing British consumers. The government pointed out that British growth was stronger than the USA's in the first quarter, and that some forecasters believed the UK would do better than France this year. But Labour were quickly on the attack.
The economy's flatlined. We're now growing well below the EU average. Confidence down, inflation up. It's not working. It's the wrong way to get the deficit down. It's going too far and too fast. It's not a snow effect or a world oil price effect. The George Osborne effect is what is undermining our economy now.
Back at Eurovision, Greece, which saw unexpected growth in the first quarter, will be hoping for success tomorrow. Ireland, meanwhile, whose hopes rest with Jedward, will have to wait a few weeks more for their latest economic figures and to see where they now sit in the Eurozone growth table. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
I'm speechless. Well, for more on the economic picture in Europe and around the globe, I spoke with Roben Farzad, a senior writer for Bloomberg Businessweek. He joined me from New York. Roben, thanks very much for coming on. Nobody thought that Greece was going to grow this quarter, did they? I mean, I'm stunned by that.
It's not hard to do. It's not exactly gravity-defying after you've cratered from the year-ago period where Greece was emanating out into the contagion into the rest of Europe. So let's not forget, they're coming off of a huge economic dive and a reckoning, and so to have a 0.8% uptick is rather cold comfort.
What do you think of the argument made by the opposition in Britain, that the reason that Britain has flat economic growth at the moment compared to other countries in Europe is because the government is trying and cutting too much, that the austerity programme is too big and too severe? Can we learn kind of overarching lessons about how to deal with deficits from the numbers that have just come out of Europe, Roben?
There is austerity in Britain. In fact, you know, we here in the States call it much more of a stiff upper lip policy, whereas you weren't going to run the meter on higher and higher and higher deficits and try to continuously spend your way out of the crisis the way it has been in the United States, where we're running up against a debt ceiling here. But what I think this speaks to is a fissure between UK, which was more of a Eurozone holdout in terms of free travel and the euro currency, and France and Germany, which are more integration type players who are saying, look at the example, we're all in this together, look at Greece, look at Portugal, and now the opposition in the UK saying that you do not want to be dragged into this morass as well. Not only are you espousing austerity here, but do you really want to be hitting up the beleaguered laborer in the UK for more money to bail out the profligate likes of Greece and Portugal? And I think that's the debate.
Well, I saw a headline today in the Financial Times suggesting that actually what should happen is that Greece and Portugal should just leave the Eurozone, that it would be better for them and perhaps better for the health of the Eurozone generally. Does it have a chance, this experiment which has had so many problems in the last year or two, do you think it's going to last, Roben, the Eurozone in its current form?
I think the regret is there, and certainly when reading some of the back and forth from the labor ministers and the central bankers and the differences in opinions between Brussels and Berlin and London here is that this is a doomed marriage in many sorts. But I think the counterfactual, the idea of letting this family fall apart, or maybe going after the assets and trying to divvy up the estate is far more difficult and vexing than the prospect of a reconciliation, however unappealing that might seem right now. I mean, you have Germany, which is really worried about its banks on the hook for exposure to Greece or Portugal if they are in effect allowed to secede and default on their debts. You have the French saying that let's try to do this, let's try another round of bringing in the ECB and an austerity package. But does any government, any responsible government, really want to put that on its taxpayers?
Roben Farzad joining us from New York, from Bloomberg Business Week. Thanks so much for coming in, Roben.
My pleasure, Caddy. Have a good weekend.